Okay, so let's move into now how to graph. We're going to call this standard form, right? So far, we saw how to graph using the vertex form, how to graph that using the intercept form. Now we're going to learn how to graph using the standard form, right? Now, what we're going to do, the vertex is very important, right? We talked about the vertex already. So the vertex is very important. Now I'm going to say, looking at these values, the numbered in front of the x squared, so in this case, a 1, that's going to be my a value. So a is equal to 1. The number in front of the x, the one in the center, is going to be my b value. So I'm going to say b is equal to 12. And then c is equal to positive 30. So you guys can see where I get my values, my a, b, c values. Now I'm going to use two of them for me to find part of the vertex, right? For the vertex, I know it has an x and a y value, right? A point has an x and a y value. The way I'm going to find the x value is going to be the x value is going to be negative b over 2 times a. I know my b in this case is 12, so negative b, I'm going to call this negative 12. I know a is 1, so 2 times 1 is 2. And then negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. So I know part of my vertex. I know the x value. Now, for me to figure out the y value, because I need to know an x and a y value for my vertex. Remember, vertex is a point. I'm going to use this whole equation. I'm going to use the whole equation, but instead of x, I'm going to use negative 6. And that's how I'm going to find out the y value. Let me use red so we don't get confused. So I'm going to say y equals negative 6 all squared plus 12 times a negative 6 plus 30. Again, I'm using the equation, but instead of x, I'm using negative 6. So I have that y is equal to positive 36, right? Negative 6 squared is positive 36 minus 72, right? 12 times a negative 6 is negative 72, and then plus 30. I can type this in a calculator. 36 minus 72 plus 30 equals negative 6. So that's going to give me the coordinates, the x and the y value, right? That's what coordinates means. Going to give me the coordinates of my vertex. My x values here, and then my y value here. So my vertex is negative 6, negative 6. I can graph that. Right, negative 6 is it's right there. One thing, notice that in my graph, each square I'm counting by 1. In your case, in your homework, you might be counting by 2s. Okay, so be careful on that. So I found the vertex. Interesting part is that I used my a value. I'm looking at the sign. A is positive. So I have a good idea that on my graph, I have an idea how this thing's going to look like. I have a vertex and it's going to be opening up. It opens up because my a value is positive. If my a value was negative, I will say this thing opens down. Okay, now we're going to be able to find a few other points. Because my vertex, my x value is negative 6, let me make a chart. I'm going to make a chart of x and y values. And I'm going to put my negative 6 for x in the center. Let me choose 2 values before that. So 2 smaller numbers before negative 6. So negative 7, negative 8. And let me choose 2 numbers bigger than negative 6. So I'm going to go negative 5, negative 4. And I know that when x equals negative 6, y equals negative 6, right? I have my vertex there. Now, let me find other points. I'm going to use the equation. When I say equation, I mean this whole thing. Use that, but instead of x, use -7, right? So we're going to have -7 all squared plus 12 times -7 plus 30. I'm going to use that equation. So let me just write it down over here. I'm going to write it here at the bottom. -7 squared plus 12 times a -7 plus 30. I use a calculator in this case, and I get -5. Interesting is that I'm going to get a -5 here and a -5 here. The values, I put the vertex in the center because the values on one side of the vertex are going to reflect on the other side. So I get 2 for 1, we can say. Now let me find other values. I'm going to use -8. We could use -8 or -4, right? Notice that the values of x that I have left are -8 or -4. Now, it doesn't matter which one we use. We're going to get the same value. So actually, instead, let me use -4. I want to keep my numbers a little bit smaller. So I'm going to go -4 squared plus 12 times a -4 plus 30. And I find out that this gets me -2. So I have my y values of -2 here. Cool. The nice thing is that now I have 5 points, right? That chart gave me 5 points on my graph. 1 point is, the coordinates are -8 and -2. So that's about there. Then -7, -5. I also have, well, the vertex -6, -6 is already there. I have the point -5, -5. And then I have the point -4, -2. All right. Now you guys see a very good idea how this thing's going to look like. So, remember how a few minutes ago I said I expect this to be open up because my A value is positive? And look, it does open up. All right, let's take a look at question number 10. I'm going to say my A, remember I have to find an A, B, C values. I'm going to say my A is -1. All right, so just for starters, I know this graph is going to be open down. My B is +12, and my C is a -36. We're going to be using this ABC values a lot more next week, so get familiarized with those. Now, for me to find out the X value of my vertex, I know the X value of my vertex is going to be -B over 2 times A. So in this case, -12 over -2, right? 2 times A, since A is -1. Now, negative divided by negative is positive. 12 divided by 12 is 6. So I know the X value of my vertex is 6. I'm going to use the equation, this equation, to find out the Y value. Now, one thing very, very important, the negative value on the X. I'm going to say Y equals, the negative has nothing to do with the square. I'm squaring X first, and then I'm getting the negative. So I'm going to do inside parentheses here, I'll put the 6. I'm not going to square a -6. I'm going to square the 6 first, and then I'll deal with the negative. The reason why I said the negative has nothing to do with the squared, because if I wanted it to be in the squared, I would have added parentheses there. So again, I'm going to square the 6 first, and then I'll deal with the negative side. Okay, so negative 6 squared plus 12 times 6 minus 36. So that gives me negative 36. Remember, I do the 6 squared, and then I deal with the negative, so negative 36 plus 72, right? 12 times 6 is 72, minus 36. Negative 36 plus 72 minus 36 is 0. So I know a point, my vertex. My vertex is the point 6, 0. Remember, there's my x value, there's my y value. So my point 6, 0 is right here. And I know this thing is going to open down. Okay, so I have a good idea. Now let me find other points. So I'm going to do a chart of x and y values, and I'm going to put my vertex in the center, 6, 0. Now let me go 2 numbers below 6. So 5 and 4. Now 2 numbers bigger than 6, 7, 8. And I'll be able to find points here. I'm still using the whole equation, right? So for the 5, so let me go negative 5 squared plus 12 times 5 minus 36. Using the equation, instead of x, I'm using 5. I could choose 5 or 7. I'm going to get the same answer, but I'm going to choose 5 just to make it smaller. So negative 25 plus 60 minus 36, I get negative 1. Okay. So that means I have negative 1 here and negative 1 here. Now I could choose for my x value either 4 or 8. I'm going to choose 4 just to keep my number smaller. So negative 4 squared plus 12 times 4 minus 36. So negative 16 plus 48 minus 36, it gives me negative 4. So I'm going to get a negative 4 here and a negative 4 here. Cool. I have 5 points. Let me plot those points for now. Negative 5, 5, negative 1. And then 7, negative 1. Then I have 8, negative 4. And then 4, negative 4. Okay, so I'm going to say this thing looks like that. Okay, cool. It is up and down, one thing that I expected. So that's good. Let's take a look at a couple more examples. I'm going to say my A value. Remember, I have to do A, B, C. For number 11, my A value is going to be negative 1. So I expect this to be up and down. My B value is going to be negative 4, and my C value is going to be negative 3. Let me find the X value of my vertex. And I know it's a negative B over 2 times A. So I have positive 4. Right? Remember, see how B is negative 4. So the negative of a negative. So that's why I said positive 4 over negative 2. right? A is -1, so 2 times A will be -2. Now 4 times a -2 is -2. So I know my X value. Let me find the Y value. Remember, I have to use this equation. Now, I'm not going to write Y equals. I'm just going to write the equation after the equal sign. So I'm going to go, there's a negative. Inside parentheses, I'm going to put a -2 squared. Because remember, X is -2. So that's why inside parentheses, I put the -2. There is a negative sign at the beginning that stays outside of my parentheses. And then minus 4 times a -2 minus 3. So -4, right? Because -2 squared is +4, but because of the negative at the front, -4 plus 8 minus 3. That happens to be 1. I know my vertex. My vertex is the point -2, 1. There's my vertex. And I know this thing is up and down. Let me find a few other points. Remember, I'm going to make a chart of X and Y values. My X on the vertex is -2. So I'm going to put my -2, 1. I put my vertex in the center. Let me choose two smaller numbers than -2. So I'm going to go -3, -4. Do you notice that when I say two smaller numbers, I choose the immediate numbers, right? Consecutive numbers. Now let me choose two numbers bigger than -2. The immediate numbers are -1 and 0. So it's not just any two numbers bigger than -2, the next two numbers, right? Consecutive numbers. Okay. Let me zoom out so I can see the whole equation. So, okay, so let me find coordinates when x equals either -3 or -1. I'm going to use -1. So I'm going to say there's a negative inside parentheses -1 squared minus 4 times a -1 minus 3. Okay, so -1 plus 4 minus 3, it gives me 0. So 0 and 0. Okay, good. Now let me find other 2 points. I'm going to use x equals 0. So -0 squared minus 4 times 0 minus 3. So I get -0 minus 0 minus 3. So, okay, -3, -3. That was easy. Okay, let me zoom in. Let me get these points. So I have the vertex. I have -3, 0 and -1, 0. I also have -4, -3, and 0, -3. Okay, have a good idea how this thing looks like. And I expected this to go um, down because my A was negative. So roughly, I'm gonna say looks like that. All right, one last example. Let's take a look. Let me zoom in here. Okay, there. So question number 12. My A value is 1, +1. So I expect this to be open up. My B value is +2, and my C value is -4. For the X value of my vertex, I remember negative B over 2 times A. So -2 times 2. -2 over 2. -2 divided by 2 is -1. So cool, I know the X value of my vertex is -1. I'm going to use that equation. So -1 squared plus 2 times -1 minus 4. So I have 1 minus 2 minus 4. That's -5. So in this case, I'm going to say my vertex, the coordinates of my vertex are -1, -5. -1, -5, it's right there. And I expect this to be open up. Okay, so let me make a chart of X and Y values. My vertex in the center, -1, -5. For smaller numbers of -1, I'm going to choose -2, -3. For bigger numbers, after -1, I'm going to choose 0 and +1. All right, if X equals 0, let's see, I get 0 squared plus 2 times 0 minus 4. And this gives me -4. So if X equals 0, Y equals -4. Good thing is that I get the same value when X equals -2. If you don't believe me, try it, and you're going to see. Now, for the other values, I can choose X equals -3 or X equals 1. I'm going to choose 1. So 1 squared plus 2 times 1 minus 4. So I get 1 plus 2 minus 4. That's -1. All right, so I have the points. It's a -3, -1. That's right here. -2, -4. The vertex, and then 0, -4. And then 1, -1. Okay. Remember I said I expected this graph to go up. So okay, makes sense. Roughly looks like that. All right, let me zoom out so you guys can see what we did.